Okay.
We'll talk about the Trump campaign. What has happened so far? Shortly after his inauguration, we saw protests all over America and the world. Today, a couple of days after the election, we saw celebrations in the streets of America. We've never witnessed anything like this. How do you reflect on what you saw today in the nation?
Well, first, Regina, I just want to say that this is the very last interview I'll ever give in front of my Gade for Senate banner, because that campaign is over, and I lost, and I think Virginia lost, but here we are. So what I would say about the Trump campaign is that, you know, the fact that people are willing to, you know, riot in the streets when he wins and then riot in the streets when he loses, I find to be very odd in terms of American history. I've never seen anything like it, and there's nothing I've ever seen in any of the history books that's like it. And so I think that President Trump, you know, really excites his supporters and also mobilizes his detractors in a way that is really remarkable. And you know, I think we're going to be looking at this as historians for a very long time.
And so he announced today that he's going to prosecute his case in court beginning on Monday. Do you support the president's efforts to challenge the outcome of the election in court?
Yeah, well, look, so I think that every single vote, every single legal vote should be counted. And I think every illegal vote should be thrown out. And there are certainly some places where, you know, where there are irregularities, where I had a campaign worker, and this is just an anecdote, it's not data, but one of my campaign workers used to live in California, and now she lives in Virginia, and she voted in Virginia, but she literally mailed to her, she got a California ballot. And there are some things that we need to do as a country to secure our elections. But ultimately, what we have every 2 years, and especially every 4 years with the presidential election, is we have something that we call, you know, that I call a bloodless revolution. We have a revolution where we can throw out our old leaders and we can pick new leaders. And what's beautiful about America is that we've always done that in a peaceful and orderly and disciplined way. And what I really want out of this transition, whichever side, you know, I think that probably it's going to be President Biden. I think that the Trump administration should accept the results of the election and then move out and look forward. We as Republicans should look forward to how do we make our case to the American people so that we win again in 2021 in Virginia, in 2022 nationally, in 2024 at the presidential level.
So President-elect Joe Biden made a statement today, and he said the election is over. It's time to put the anger and the harsh rhetoric behind us. Do you agree with President-elect Joe Biden?
100%, yes. Once the election, so obviously, of course, we need to run. If there's a legitimate legal challenge, we need to run that to the end. But at the end of the day, I think what we're going to see is that that Joe Biden is elected as the president. And if that happens, I personally, as a Republican, am committed to the fact that the American people have spoken through the Electoral College, and now we have a president who I disagree with. I think he's going to be a terrible president. I think he's lost a step. I think he's going to be run by some people who I don't like. But at the end of the day, he's going to be the president. And so what we ought to do is we ought to transition in an orderly way to the Biden administration, and then it can stand or fall on its own merits.
I just want to make sure I heard that correctly. You're predicting that Joe Biden will be a terrible president?
Well, look, yes. I mean, I just don't think he has any new ideas. But here's the thing. It doesn't actually matter what I think. What matters is what the American people think. And they've voted, and they've elected him as president. Here's my prediction. My prediction is that Joe Biden is pretty elderly. He's been in office now a total of like 50 years, longer than I've been alive. And I don't think we're going to see any new, innovative, moving forward ideas out of a Biden administration. So terrible or not terrible, I don't know. But the bottom line is the American people have seen and judged Joe Biden, and it looks like they've elected him their president. And so what we need to do is move forward and get this administration going. And then be, as Americans, we need to look forward to coming together and fighting for our values. And when we lose, we continue to fight for our values. And when we win, we govern in accordance with our values.
I want to go back to my original question. I started by saying on Inauguration Day, there were protests in the streets globally, but here a few days after the election, there are celebrations in the streets. And I think you said protests on both sides. There have been a small amount of protests over the last 24 hours or so, but for the most part, we're seeing people who are celebrating the Joe Biden victory and the Donald Trump defeat. How do you reflect on that?
Well, you know, as a Republican, I will say this, that I have never been one that's inclined to express my emotions in the streets. And so when President Trump was sworn in, the fact that people are expressing their emotions in the streets, that's something that the left does. And now that he has lost, or apparently has lost, and people are expressing their emotions in the streets, that's something that the left does. But what does the right do? The right probably does what I did on Wednesday morning after I lost my election. I woke up, I realized I was in the greatest country on earth. I'd always been in the greatest country on earth. And then I went back to work fighting for my values. And I suppose that's what people on the right are doing. I don't actually know what's going on, people on the left, because those are I don't monitor those folks.
Is there any way that we can bring this country together, people in neighborhoods, communities, and on Capitol Hill?
Yeah, we can. And I want to point out that very few of us have had an experience where somebody has, severed a relationship because of differing political ideas. Because at the end of the day, Americans come together, or, your neighbors, whether or not they agree with you politically, they're still the kind of people who want to come over for a cookout, or if your dog escapes, they'll bring the dog back and that kind of thing. And, I've been talking about this for a year and a half during my campaign, that when I was wounded the second time, that people came together, black, white, gay, straight, men, women, everybody came together to donate their blood to keep me alive. And that kind of unity is, I think, what America can be at its highest and best. And so my call to my fellow Republicans and my call to my Democratic friends is, look, let's come together, let's heal our country, and then let's fight for our values. And there's some things that are just, there are some things that are non-negotiable, but there are things that we must fight for. And I'm absolutely willing to continue to fight for our shared values.
We have the nation's first female vice president, President-elect Harris, who is a minority. How do you reflect on this historic event?
Well, again, on Wednesday morning, I woke up in the greatest country on earth. And we've had a black president. We have a minority vice president, or vice president elect. It appears that we'll have a vice president who is a minority and a woman, and I think that's great. But as we look at our country, what we need to recognize is that there are a lot of people trying to run our country down and say that America is not great. America is great. Look at the opportunity that it gives to people who are different than the people who have, been in office before. And I reflect on the fact that, in some of the countries around the world, if you are gay, you have every reason to hide that identity, because if you come out, you're going to get stoned or thrown off a building. We've seen that in Iraq and places under the control of ISIS. And in our country, we welcome people who are different. Now we've had people who are of all different kinds as the president and the vice president and so forth. And I think that's great. On the other hand, I'm not an identity politics person, so I care about ideas, not color of skin or content of rhetoric, but I care about ideas. And so as I look at, Vice President-elect Harris, I wonder about the fact that as Attorney General in California, she kept a whole lot of people in prison past their due dates. There's some things that are about her record that are very disturbing, and they don't get forgiven because she happens to be a woman, because she happens to be a person of color.
If you had an opportunity to meet with President Trump, what would you say to him?
Well, what I would say to him is, Mr. President, we have a great country. You have benefited tremendously from this great country. And now what we need to do is recognize that one of the things that makes our country great is that we accept the results of elections. And so Once this election is certified, once all the ballots are counted, once all the legal challenges are settled, the president, I think, should and will transition peacefully into the next chapter of his very successful life.
Would you tell Mr. Biden that you believe that he's going to be a terrible president?
I don't think his ideas are solid. I think that this is a guy who has had 50 years to put his ideas into place. And what we've seen from him is a pattern of lies. We've seen from him a pattern of I think twisting the truth. And we've seen on I care about foreign policy deeply. I'm a 25-year Army veteran. Every foreign policy thing that Joe Biden has ever weighed in on, he's gotten wrong. He was the one who's going to divide Iraq into 3 pieces. He was the one who said, "Oh, it's a good idea to overthrow Libya," and both of those cases have been terrible. But what I would say to President Biden, to President-elect Biden, is that I hope he listens to his advisors, and I hope he realizes that he is in a very privileged position as the 46th president of the United States. I think that he's certainly in a position that requires us to look at him and say, Mr. President, let's go forward as a country.
Are you concerned there could be violence in the streets?
No, I don't think so. For all the rhetoric about people on the right being, violent, I think most of the violence we've seen in the streets over the past, over the past year, certainly, and over the past, 5, 6, 7 years, a lot of that violence is driven by people on the left. Actually, it's sort of this weird fringe of the left. It's not Democrats. It's anarchists who are sort of to the left of regular Democrats who are driving some of that violence. And so I don't expect that there will be violence. I certainly hope not. And I would call, as I did in my concession statement, I would call on all Americans to look at this and say, America has spoken. We have a new president, and now we move forward and we fight for our values.
Do you have to rebuild the GOP at this point?
That's a great question. I think that the answer is no. What we do have to do is return the Republican Party to its core values. And if those core values are limited government and strong national defense and promoting individual liberty and some of that stuff, then I think we're on the right track. And if the people who are sort of in the driver's seat right now of the Republican Party say that, oh yeah, we should, protect big business overall, or we should, I think there's some real problems there. But I think that if the Republican Party lives up to its values, then there's no rebuilding required. What we do need to do is have some leaders in the party, and I intend to be one of those, some leaders in the party who are saying, wait, when we stray from our values, we should return to our values. And I'm proud of the campaign I ran, by the way, which was one that wasn't, didn't cast any stones, didn't do anything like that, but was explicit about my values, explicit about our party values, and then laid those out for the people of Virginia in a way that I think was clear and concise. And I hope that, those values will be successful in the future.
Did you find the president's behavior unacceptable?
I'm sorry, in which circumstance?
The president's behavior. So there's a catalog of things that I could discuss, beginning with when he was running in the primary, when he said about John McCain, I like people who aren't captured. I can open fire on Fifth Avenue and not lose a vote.
Yeah.
There's a catalog of all of these things. People are very critical of the president's behavior, even people who support his policies.
Yeah, I do support the president's policies by and large. There's some areas where I disagree with his policies. But I think in order to understand Donald Trump, I think you need to understand that he came up in life, at least the last 20 years or so, he's an entertainer. He's a showman. And so his words are not policy. His words are just words. And if you look at his Twitter pronunciations and some of the other things he said, I think that if you view them through the lens of being entertainment, then you come very close to understanding exactly what he's talking about. But I'm not going to defend every statement or condemn every statement that the president has made. Certainly, I would be appalled if some of my friends made some of the statements he's made, and I would be thrilled if some of my friends made other statements that he's made.
So was he a drag on your campaign?
I don't know. What I do know is that I got more votes as a Republican in this statewide election than any Republican has ever in Virginia for a Senate seat. And so I think that I performed very well, and I think people were able to separate what happens in the executive branch election from what happens uh, in the legislative branch election. And so there were a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump who voted for me, and there were, of course, there were actually a lot of people who voted for Joe Biden and then voted for me because they saw those elections differently. And I think that's fine. I think that an informed electorate gets to make decisions about who they want as the executive, and then they look who they want as the Senate, and then they look as who they want as their House candidate.
Did campaigning change you?
I think the only thing that changed is that I have come to a deeper realization of how great America is. From Lee County at the tip of Virginia to Virginia Beach and to Fairfax County, I've met shopkeepers and housewives and school teachers and farmers and shaken the hands of coal miners with their thick, dirty hands. And I've said to myself, oh my gosh, what an amazing country we live in. It's amazing. And I knew that already from my 25 years of military service, but one of the things the campaign really did is just reinforce my love for America, my love for our values, and a hope for the future that we can look forward past our nasty little short range political fights and look forward to a future that is, with liberty and justice for all.
You're absolutely sure you're retiring the Gade for Senate background?
Yeah, so the Gade for Senate background's got to go away. Sadly, I wish I could keep it up, but I got beat. I got beat in this election. I got outspent 5 or 6 to 1, and I outperformed all the polls. But at the same time, I got beat by around 400,000 votes, and so that's okay. I will continue to fight for my values. I'll continue to fight for Virginia. I'll continue to fight for America, as I always have, at great personal cost.
And will you consider running for office again?
Yeah, I'm not closing the door on that. There's a lot of people pressuring me to think about next year, to think about, a couple of years from now, people saying, hey, Tim Kaine's coming up in 4 years and Mark Warner's coming up in 6 years. And of course, the governor's seat is open next year. I'll commit to this, that I am committed to fighting for America, as I always have. I'm going to continue to do what I think is right. And I'm, of course, open to a wide variety of experiences.
If you were to write a book about the past 4 years in America, what would be the title of that book?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. That's such a great question. It's impossible. I don't know. I think I'm sorry. I can't answer that question. You're gonna have to trim this part out of the interview because I have no idea.
Give it some thought. Give it a little bit of thought. Okay. I'm gonna ask this question while you're thinking about the title of this book. So far, there is no evidence of cheating in this election. Is the president wasting his time with this effort, creating more discontent in the public at a time when we really need a sense of unity?
Well, we definitely need a sense of unity. I 100% agree with that. I do think that in certain areas, there's some questions that need to be answered about the integrity of our electoral systems. But in Virginia, I'll just speak to Virginia. One of the things that has really made people upset in Virginia is the fact that at 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, I was leading by like 200,000 votes. And then at 11:30, I was down by 400,000. And what happened? It must be a conspiracy. Now, what I say is actually, no, it's not a conspiracy. What happened is that the votes that were absentee votes from some blue counties, Fairfax, Arlington, Loudoun, those votes weren't even counted. They weren't even put in the tally until 11. And when they were put in, everything switched. And that's what happened in my election. There was no like grand conspiracy or anything like that. And I would call on all of my supporters and people around the country to realize that same thing happened in a lot of places around the country. And as absentee votes trickled in, what we saw is kind of the fruit of the Democrat Party's effort to make sure that people voted early. And those votes came in, and they came in heavily Democratic. And we shouldn't pretend that that's some kind of surprise. It's simply math. And so I don't like that. I wish that I'd gotten elected, but I didn't. And so what we need to do is move forward as a country from where we are right now.
If you were given the opportunity to participate, contribute to the Biden campaign, if you were given the opportunity to participate in the Biden administration, would you?
Of course, absolutely, I would. Yes. So look, I served under the George W. Bush administration when I was on active duty. I served under the Obama administration when I was on the National Council on Disability for about 5 years as an appointee, serving on this National Council advising the President and Congress on disability policy. Same thing on the VA Advisory Committee on Disability Compensation. I served on that for a number of years under the Obama administration. And then I served in the Trump administration as a political appointee after I retired from the Army. So I think that every president, Democrat, Republican, Green, Independent, whoever, every president deserves to have people in his or someday her administration who love the Constitution and are good at their jobs. And I love the Constitution and I'm good at my job. And I would be happy to work in a Biden administration, just as I was happy to work in a Trump administration and a Bush administration and during the Obama administration.
All right, one more shot. Title of the book, The Past 4 Years in America.
I don't know. I'm so clouded. Listen, I'm so clouded by how disastrous 2020 has been.
You can share that with David. You can share it with David, and
all right.
You can text me that answer to me. Well, I've really enjoyed meeting with you via Zoom, and I also enjoyed working with you for the historic debate at Norfolk State University a few weeks ago.
That debate was really fun for me, primarily because I got a chance to lay out clearly the Republican idea of everybody should stand in front of God and the law as an individual. And when I condemned white supremacy in that debate, I think it was a very powerful moment. When I talked about criminal justice reform, when I talked about those things, I think the Republican Party at its highest and best should recognize that it's the party that freed the slaves and created the civil rights movement and is for individual liberty. And the Democratic Party has managed to shift the narrative on us. And I think that as Republicans, we should really, truly embrace the idea of individual liberty. And that means that Black lives, of course, do matter. And so I was happy to defend my values in that debate. And I thought it came out very well for me, actually.
So if you do write that book, let me know ahead of time.
All right.
I'll be for your book signing.
I'll do it. Thanks so much.
Dr. Gade, thank you so much. And I wish you well.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.